Joining us now to talk more about this is retired U.S. Army captain and Nevada Senate candidate, Sam. Excuse me. Great to see you, Sam. Great to have you with us. When we talk about this stuff, I actually want to mention here real quickly, in 2008, you deployed as an infantry platoon leader to Kandahar, Afghanistan. A few months after that, your vehicle was struck by an IED. And Sam, I wanted to talk to you about obviously what happened yesterday and your thoughts on that first. I know we're still waiting to hear from the Defense Department to learn more about these Marines, but what was your initial reaction when you learned about the bombings yesterday?
I think yesterday was a day that was really pivotal. We went from this being a tragedy to a national disgrace. And as I reflected on it, I think that for many Americans, yesterday will be one of those things that lives forward in our minds is something that we know where we were when it happened, and it marks a very sad point in our history.
We're talking with retired U.S. Army Captain Sam Brown, who's running for Senate in Nevada. There's been a lot of blame, too, Sam. We saw President Biden yesterday kind of saying he relied on the advice that he got from the generals, specifically as it relates to a question about closing the airport, the Bagram Air Force Base. And also there were questions about, the U.S. State Department and the Biden administration, the Defense Department, giving over these names of American citizens and our Afghan allies. If that in fact did occur, first of all, how could that happen? Number two, what should happen to those responsible who did make that decision?
I've been saying that one of the big problems we have right now is that there's a merging of the Department of State and Department of Defense. And unfortunately, politicians and bureaucrats are leading these decisions, and the execution is left to our military forces, who are hamstrung by the decisions of the commanders. And when we have our military brass that is willing to basically bend to the will of politicians and be subordinate to the Department of State, as we've heard Press Secretary John Kirby mention multiple times, the Department of Defense is there to support the Department of State in these evacuations. This is a predictable outcome, unfortunately. I wrote in USA Today op-ed on July 8th that the Taliban would take over all of the equipment left behind for the Afghan government. Others have called this out. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is completely predictable. This is a failure of leadership. This is a failure of politicians and bureaucrats running foreign policy, and it's now becoming a major national security issue.
And that's the concern. We heard from Ambassador Ryan Crocker saying before that the war is yet to come. And, we also hear talk about going back into Afghanistan, perhaps about securing the Bagram Air Force Base or the airport, in Kandahar. I think before that decision is made, someone like yourself should, have an opportunity to speak about that. We spent 20 years in Afghanistan. One thing we've learned is that any, victories there seem to be temporary. What do you think about going back into Afghanistan?
Well, the conditions obviously have changed, especially with the releasing of these ISIS-K prisoners. And, Afghanistan has now become a place for terrorists to flock from all around the world, and especially the region. They can get there very quickly. But look, Congress has failed for decades now. The authorization to use the military force for all of our operations in Afghanistan is nearly 20 years old, and Congress has not gone back and reauthorized that. We also have a case where the House Armed Services Committee in May requested, which was legal by law under Section 1215, that the Secretary of Defense provide a full threat assessment, a risk assessment, to Congress before they withdraw troops, and that they were not allowed to spend any money to withdraw troops below 2,000 without that risk assessment. And President Biden waived that. And our leaders at the Department of Defense did nothing to provide a transparent, full accounting of that risk assessment. We need leaders who not only have experience on the ground and understand the ramifications of our foreign policy and national security decisions, to be in a position of influence and to be able to lead from the front and also then investigate when we have tragedies like this. But we also need bureaucrats and politicians to get out of the way whenever we have, these terrible conditions, and that's unfortunately mostly what I'm seeing. I'm hoping that Americans will see past the politics of this and understand that this is a true leadership failure, and we need new people to provide accountability and oversight in these cases. And it's one of the reasons I'm running for U.S. Senate here in Nevada.
Sam, I was talking to a friend of mine who is an Afghan veteran, did 2 tours, lost 22 of his platoon mates while serving there in mostly around Marja, Afghanistan. And he was saying, we need guys like Dan Crenshaw and Brian Mast, like Sam Brown in Washington, D.C., so people can see the real consequences of this stuff moving forward. And, everyone can see how you have suffered on camera right now. I mean, do you think that's part of this equation here, that, our leaders in Washington don't really understand the consequences of these types of prolonged military actions?
Yeah, John, I do. I think a lot of it's, leadership by ignorance and then leadership without accountability. And I couldn't agree more, especially when we have a protracted war like this with major cost to this country. It's important for Americans to have folks who are representing and helping to lead, who understand the consequences of those decisions. And once again, this is ultimately why I'm running for office, and I'm hoping and encouraging others to run for office who don't necessarily come from a political class. I don't have a pedigree, with the right last name, but Americans need to be engaged. And what I'm asking, and I guess I've seen, is there's been some discouragement because Afghanistan is 8,000 miles away, and people say, well, what can I do? I'll tell you what you can do. You can get engaged now. There are good men and women around this country lining up to challenge the political class in the primaries next year and eventually in the general election. I hope that people will find folks like myself, and if you believe that we are what this country needs, join us, support us now. We need that support now. It's early in the political cycle, but unfortunately, the way our system works is our political leaders provide accountability and oversight, and that's what I'm running to do. And I'd ask people to join me at CaptainSamBrown.com. Look for others like me and support us now.
It is 8,000 miles away, but I don't know any person personally who did not feel the effects of what happened yesterday here at home. A lot of people care about this country, and they want to see the best for our troops. Sam Brown, running for Senate in Nevada, a retired Army captain, an Afghan veteran. Sam, thanks so much for your service and for everything else. We appreciate it.